My name is Dr. Stephen Jones. As an organizational psychologist and executive coach, I love to study what allows people to bring out the best in themselves and others. So join me as I welcome top leaders to uncover the future of leadership. Welcome to the Leadership Secret podcast, where top leaders reveal insights earned, wisdoms gained, and transformational moments that have defined and redefined their leadership. I'm your host, Dr. Stephen Jones, and today's guest is a phenomenal educator, inspiration to many, and transformational leader herself, Dr. Star Rivera-Lacey. Welcome, Star.
Thank you.
Glad you're here. Really excited because Star and I will work together to uncover a few secrets of the future of effective leadership. Let me tell you a little bit more about our guest. Star is born and raised in Oceanside, California. She is the superintendent president of Palomar Community College District that serves 29,000 students and manages a $584 million budget. Y'all, I said million. Okay. Dr. Rivera is the first Latino to hold that position in Palomar College District's 79-year history. And it's also a Hispanic Serving Institution, which Palomar College District is, with over 52% of the students identifying as Latino, Latina, or Latinx. One of the things that I found really interesting is, as well, Star is the daughter of immigrant parents who came over to the United States from El Salvador, right? In order to support their transition, they decided to study English at Palomar College.
Sure did.
Right, where Star was a little 5-year-old running in the hallways of Palomar College District and is now the president of that exact institution. What's your thought on that, Star?
You know what? That's a point of pride for me. It's something that really defines my purpose of what it is that I'm doing. It really informs my leadership and what it is that I'm trying to accomplish while being at Palomar. And I take it as a huge responsibility and just so grateful. And I'll tell anybody that'll listen to me about that story because I think it's a full circle moment.
That's awesome. But wait, there's more. Star has over 25 years of experience in the community college setting and another 10 years in the nonprofit educational sector. Star recently was named the 2025 District 76 Distinguished Woman of the Year. She's been named a fellow of the Wheelhouse Institute on Leadership, the Aspen Institute Rising President's Fellow, and a National Community College Hispanic Council Fellow, where she serves as the current president-elect of this national organization. So not only making local impact, Star is providing leadership on the national level as well. A product of the public education system, right?
Absolutely.
And started your education at the community college. Star obtained a PhD from Claremont Graduate University. But y'all, it gets even better. I'm just telling you. Because Star is a second-degree black belt in Yamashita Shorin Ryu Karate. That's what I'm talking about. So the message, y'all, is don't mess with the president. Don't mess with the president. Okay. So I'm really honored and excited to have you as a guest on the Leadership Secret podcast. Tell us a little bit about your passion for leadership and making an impact.
Well, first of all, thank you. I am so honored to be here. I have followed your career. I've admired you over the years and the work that you've done. And so to be asked to do this and to be a guest is it's a privilege, and I'm very excited. So thank you for bestowing this opportunity on me. It's a little bit of what you were talking about earlier. And that for me, what really made a difference for me was my education. So as you mentioned, my parents immigrated from El Salvador. And when they did so, they came to this country in hope for a better future for their children. But like many immigrant families, it was a difficult transition for them. So my experience growing up in Oceanside, which I'm a proud Oside girl, it was informed by being low income, first generation, and really dealing with issues of generational poverty and so forth. And so, although I was in this, I actually was born here. So my parents immigrated with 4 kids in tow. And my mom thought she was done having kids. And one day she thought she was not feeling well, and she thought she had a cold. Well, that cold ended up being me. As such, being born and raised in Oceanside, but still having this kind of bicultural experience, right, with my parents being from El Salvador and also being raised here. The one thing that they always made very clear was that education, the importance of education. And what I think is really important about that is that you don't have to have a lot of wealth to be able to bestow onto your kids the wealth of dreams, right, and of hope. And so I was really privileged that my parents understood the importance of education. And not only were they saying the importance of education, they were making the sacrifices to learn English, to take classes, and again, at Palomar College. So their actions were consistent with their words. And it is true. I have pictures of myself running around Palomar College, I think as young as 5. And all of that really kind of informs what it is that I do at Palomar, to create the conditions to maximize people's hopes and dreams. I tell people the community college is the place of a million chances. We take 100% of anybody. And if you have a dream, we're going to help you reach those goals and sustain that dream. And if you don't have a dream, come see us, because we're going to even help you discover what that dream is for you. Very good. Yeah. So for me, the work that I do and being in education, because I know what it did for me and the trajectory, my life would be so different today if it wasn't for my education. And so, I'm a big believer in that. And so trying to, again, create those conditions for other people. Wow. Yeah.
Okay. I just got a secret, y'all. The wealth of dreams. Right. And the ability to look at every 5-year-old and every position at every level of any organization or community, and to know that what is possible in the future, right, is not limited by or determined by the current state of the current age.
Absolutely.
That's Absolutely. Deep. That's deep. That's just real deep. So why leadership for you?
Interestingly enough, I never quite formalized that in my mind. I never kind of said, oh, I'm going to be a leader when I grow up. It was just one of those things that I think if you find your passion, and it is more when you're trying to do good in the world, right? I think people recognize that, people see that, and then all of a sudden they pay attention. And I'm really big on bloom when you're planted. Right? Do good where you are. You don't need a title to do good, and you can do it at any level. And so I think that kind of mindset was trying to be good and do good at every level and work hard. It would just naturally start to place me in positions, and then people would be like, hey, you there, we'll follow you. Do you want to take the lead? And, and a lot of times I was a reluctant leader, right? I was like, what do you mean, me? Why? Okay. But I do really speak to, and as we talked about, I love this idea of leader shift, because, you have to have a purpose that is greater than the title, because titles come and go. And leadership for me truly is about purpose.
Yes.
And so, since I already told you how my education literally changed the trajectory and the opportunities of my life, it's like a secret that I want to tell everybody about,
Yes.
right? And community colleges and free, and let's do this, because again, the education piece, I want to be really clear, inoculates you. The more that you go up in education, it inoculates you from poverty and the byproducts of poverty. The communities that I grew up in, right? There are a lot of individuals by circumstance of birth that have ended up in places in life that perhaps, they would want to be in a different space.
Sure.
And I know that the only thing, right, that insulated and protected me was that education. So when you have that kind of reasoning of why you do this, right, all of a sudden, you just find yourself in leadership roles.
Nice.
And then the other part of it was that, so I guess I was the reluctant leader at first. And then I started realizing, wait a minute, I have some skills here.
Yes.
And that was another like awareness piece. And I realized that because leadership, we talk a lot about formal leadership, but there's so much informal leadership that happens.
Yes.
And I don't think that a lot of us, those of us who are first generation, know how to translate that and to formal leadership.
Yes.
Or not that we don't know how to translate that, but we don't value it in the same way. So we have to do a paradigm shift to recognize in the spaces, in our family spaces, in our personal spaces, and we find ourselves in leadership. Those are the same tools
That's right.
that we can do to, in organizations, to be able to apply those.
Yes.
and move forward.
It's so good. You said the reluctant leader that you are and were, right?
Yeah.
That people said, I want to follow you,
Yeah.
right? And that to me is leading people through influence,
Yeah.
right? As opposed to formal authority or title, right?
Exactly.
And so I love your point that says leadership is action.
Yeah.
Right. And we can take action and we can transfer those actions in lots of different settings. Right. Lots of different situations. That's powerful.
And you don't have to be the number one.
Yes.
Right. So, I heard a joke one time, but there's some truth to it,
Yeah.
right? About, what turns the head. You could be the head of something, but what
Yes.
turns the head? The neck.
The neck.
Turns the head. And I think if you start to practice leadership skills,
Yes.
wherever you are, you will eventually find your way to that
Yes.
leadership position. But I think the other part of it too is that you can't always assume because you're the leader that you know everything.
That's right.
And I'm really clear of when I know that I need a vice president or the expert in a specific area to be able to take the lead.
Yeah.
So I also know how to follow.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things that I think is important. And I think the other part of it too is when I talk about leadership, I think it's really important to keep your ego in check. Because your ego can be your biggest enemy.
That's right.
And I really believe in this idea, and you'll hear me as we talk through
Yeah.
the podcast about this, is this growth mindset. It's never like you get to a certain point and you're like, okay, I get to leadership. I got here. I'm good. But it's a constant reinventing, rethinking, growing because times change, people change.
Yes.
I'm a big believer in being able to adjust, being able to shift, and understanding that sometimes leaders take, a back seat, and sometimes, we take the front seat.
Right. It makes me think about as in these leadership roles, it's important that we don't believe the hype.
Yes.
Right. And sometimes somebody told me once, they said, Stephen, as you move up in your career, you won't get smarter. They're like, it will just become more risky for people to tell you no or to disagree with you. So it may feel like you've got the answer.
Yep.
Right. Versus, I love your point that says, even with behavior reinforced, right, ego, if you will, right, the idea is to always be looking for new, different, additional, right, information, ideas, and people. Yeah. Right. And so looking to not be threatened by the brilliance of others, but to really put a spotlight on that brilliance.
Yeah, and you know what, and I can't agree with that, because I don't think we talk enough in leadership about the investing in other people because you're
Yes.
worried that they're going to threaten you. Here's the thing, I was placed in really beautiful circumstances where I worked for leaders who were invested in me becoming a colleague, a partner. They saw something in me, and I hope that that's the passion, right?
Yes.
That they recognize, you know what, let's help cultivate this.
Yes.
And once you get into that leadership position, you have to have enough sense of self to know that investing in other people, right, is just that, because you're trying to make impact. You're trying to make generational change, legacy change, like 100 years from now. What you did that was good, is it still moving in that direction? And I will tell you, if it wasn't for those people who invested in me, who were not operating off of fear, I wouldn't be where I am today. And now that I'm in that seat, I have a responsibility to do that for others, just like it was done for me. But there's a scarcity mindset in leadership, right? And depending on what communities that you come from, right? It's like, okay, well, there's only going to be room for one, right? And so let me get through that door. And since there's only room for one, I'm not going to let anybody else, And that's, I think, a really deficit perspective. I think it's an old way of doing things versus, being able to shift in different ways and understand that we're as the tide rises, we're all rising, and that we have a responsibility for other leaders around us. And I would say, too, that being very consistent in action and deed. A lot of times leaders, we know what to say. We know the language, we know the verbiage, the lingo, right? But really what people are looking at are your actions. And I think that's important.
It's so good. It's that shifting from the scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset, right? That allows you to see more, right? As opposed to narrow that view. But you also said something that for me is another one of those secrets. Cultivating others requires cultivating self.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about how has STAR's journey, how do you cultivate yourself?
A couple of different ways is that I never see myself as the smartest person in the room. Never see myself as the smartest person in the room. I respect people's degrees. I respect the work that they've put in to get their titles. But I'll be really honest with you. Some of my greatest lessons have been taught to me by folks that didn't have those degrees or didn't have those titles, right? Yep. So I find inspiration in everything that I see, everything that I do, and everybody that I meet. So part of it, too, is that I surround myself with a variety of people coming from different walks of life and have conversations. And really want to know their stories, right? Want to hear their stories, because somebody always leaves me with a nugget, right? That I take and I put in my pocket and I move forward. In your introduction, you talked about my karate, my martial arts. Yes. Oh, that is the love of my life, let me tell you. And martial arts has taught me quite a lot, and so I worked very, very hard to get to where I am in my second degree black belt. But it's interesting because we will do the basic forms over and over. Yeah. Those are the forms, the kata, that you learn as white belt, right? And there's always the refinement that happens. So you can do a kata 1,000,000 times, but each time it's just going to be just a little bit different. But you have to have that white belt mindset of being able to learn and not be like, oh, I'm here and I'm wearing this belt, and so this is what that means. So I just kind of adopt that martial arts piece. I adopt it to my regular, day-to-day life. And the other part of it, too, is that I'm very, very clear that my purpose is bigger than my title. So even if today I didn't have that title, and somebody decided to take my doctorate degree away and all of those other things, even my black belt, right? It's okay in the sense that because my purpose is different.
That's powerful.
And that's one of the things that I've seen before in leadership. Folks get really caught up in that title.
That's so good.
And I think it does you a disservice.
That's awesome. Did y'all just hear the president drop that she has a second degree black belt? Did y'all just hear that? Was it just me? It was just a casual, no ego attached, just to demonstrate. I think that's so powerful. It reminds me of somebody told me once, education costs, knowledge is free. Right? And so the education gives us the knowledge that allows us to move in so many different ways with so much information. And to your point, part of what you were saying about the people in different spaces, places, roles, so on and so forth. I was talking with my mom earlier this week, and she was talking with me about, we were both talking about my aunt was the janitor at our middle school. My another aunt was the cafeteria worker at my elementary school. And so we knew, one, that we could mess up, right, and get in trouble. Right. But we also knew that the community was around us and that a person's role did not determine their value and who they are in life, right? Yeah. And so to your point, that respect becomes so, so important, big time. Yeah.
The other thing too, that you just reminded me that I want to make sure that I kind of put out here, and that is that a lot of times, and let me give you a concrete example. It'll help kind of sit the concept, is that a lot of times we have experiences in our life that we believe are detrimental and somehow have impacted us in a negative way, somehow have made us broken in some way. But if you can turn that around and recognize that you survived it, that there's a lesson in there and there's value in there that you can now use, and it actually becomes your superpower.
That's awesome.
So the example I'll give you is this. So I told you my parents had a hard time transitioning. My dad had a particularly hard time transitioning. Back in El Salvador, he wasn't a drinker. But when he came to the United States, he had a really hard time with that transition. And he ended up becoming an alcoholic, ended up passing away from cirrhosis of the liver.
Wow. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's one of those things that it's not something that I would have maybe chosen for my childhood and my life. But I'll tell you this much. Growing up in an alcoholic household and being able to navigate those waters and understand human dynamics. And when I was walking into a room, I had to quickly assess what was going on, what were those human dynamics, et cetera, et cetera. Do you know that the skill set that I learned as a child to navigate those waters is probably what's made me the most successful?
That's powerful.
Because now I can walk into situations and I'm able to assess. I'm able to read human dynamics and what's going on. So I'm looking at the verbal, the nonverbals, all of that, and I'm able to navigate situations. Before becoming a president, my degree's in counseling, right? So in my counseling settings, one-on-one with students and folks, those same skill sets that I would adapt. So I don't think we talk about that enough, because I think a lot of times we assume that leadership's supposed to look a certain way, that I'm supposed to read a book and, this is what I'm going to apply. I'm asking you to go back into your archives, look at your life experiences, and some of those negative life experiences are actually the ones that we learned the most from.
That's right.
And that we can adapt and use. Yes. I'll tell you this much. A book can't tell me what I learned as a child in that setting. And again, it's really important to look at people in their entirety, right? So yes, my father was an alcoholic, but he gave me a love for books. He told me the importance of education, and not just told me, he showed me. At one point in our life, There was 12 of us in a 2-bedroom.
Oh.
I know.
Okay.
Okay. But I'll tell you, extended family and everything. So 12 of us in a 2-bedroom. But my father, who I just told you, right, wasn't, had some struggles. There was a lamp, a desk, a typewriter, and a set of encyclopedias.
Yeah.
How powerful is that?
That is very powerful.
So that's what I think. It's really important to look at our experiences or the people around us and not just make them one-dimensional.
That's right.
But understand that we can learn something and we can take value of things if we look at it in its entirety. But it has to be that you have a lens to look at the beauty in things, right? Instead of looking at the deficit and then internalizing that deficit and then, thinking to yourself, I don't belong here and I'm not good enough and I'm not this and I'm not that. So yeah, empowerment is a big thing for me.
It's so powerful because you're naming a question and answering a question I had in my head, which is how do you remain human in the role of leader, right? And what you've just shared is just so powerful that says leader does not equal perfection.
Absolutely.
And being human does not I think it was John Legend who says our perfect imperfections, right?
Yes.
But also being vulnerable and realizing that because a skill or a behavior does not get a multisyllabic title, right?
Yep.
Emotional intelligence,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's like, I could read the room. I had to, right? It was part of surviving in my reality and thriving in my reality. Let's take that, transfer it as a skill, right? As opposed to a deficit, or let's hold both, right? But the talk that we tell ourselves around what is possible for us given our experiences just becomes so powerful and important.
And I think the other part of it too is owning it. I own every part of my reality, right? And I've worked through some of the stuff that, society told me, right? Shame, right? You right?
Absolutely.
You got to work through some of that stuff. You got to do the self-work. You got to cultivate yourself to do that self-work. So I embrace and own every part of, my background. Right. And, it may not be in my resume, right? Or my cover letter, right? But I do think it's important to just own it, speak the truth.
That's right.
Because there's power in that too.
Yeah. That's awesome. That is awesome. Superpower.
Yes.
Every one of us has them.
Yeah.
What's yours?
Resiliency. Yeah, that definitely. There were times, right, with my background, right, that, doors were closed, right, for whatever reason. Doesn't even matter what reasons that the doors were closed. But when the door was closed, I looked for the window that was open. Come
on, say that again. Come on, say that again.
Yeah, and for me, no, it's that's like a starting point for us, because, I knew, I don't know, that resilience piece, I just knew that somehow that I trusted that the universe was going to meet my energy. And, I remember, I think it was maybe sixth grade, going to seventh grade. I don't remember. Summer was coming and there was a summer computer camp. And I wanted to go to computer camp. But then I looked at the price and I knew that my parents couldn't afford it. So that's the door that closes, right?
Yes.
So I went to look for my own window. And I went and I talked to the computer teacher that was going to be teaching it over the summer. And I asked him if I could be his TA or if I could write if there was a scholarship for students to be able to go. I believe that teacher paid for me. He never told me that he paid for me. Right? He let me be his teacher's assistant. So I was his teacher assistant, and I felt good because I was working for it. But I got to go to computer camp. Right? But that really says something about my young self to be like, wait a minute, my friends are going, right? Okay, I can't. Okay, door closed. Look for the window that's open. And then when you're successfully go through the window that's open, right? First of all, you start to open windows for everybody else and then try to remove the door.
That's right.
But the other part of it is that, I have found in my career, right, when I needed folks to help me mentor, et cetera, very few people said to me no. And if they said no to me, guess what? I had lost nothing.
Yes.
I started with nothing. I lost
Yes.
nothing. But I think that's the other part of it too, that I think with leadership, right? Asking for help.
Yeah.
Asking for folks to say, hey, I really admire what you do, right? You know, can I have coffee with you? And I'm telling you, and people who ask me to have coffee, I'm like,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
It may take you 2 months to see me, but you know, I'll meet you and we'll have coffee.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. What's coming to my mind is the idea of take a step, right?
Yes.
Even if you can't see the end goal,
Exactly.
or you have a dream or a vision or somewhere you want to go, you may not be able to see how to get there, but don't let that stop you from taking a step.
Exactly.
Right? So not knowing is not a criteria for not doing.
Correct. And you said it right there. It's that action.
Yes.
That action piece.
Yes. I know both of us are marathon runners.
Yeah.
And this idea.
Running, let me say, more like waggling.
Well, we got through it.
Yes.
Right. And so this idea of, I hit the wall on one of the marathons that I ran, and I was like, I cannot see myself to 26.2, but I could get to the next tree.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I could run to the second tree, but I'm gonna have to walk to the tree after that.
Yes.
Right. So that resilience around moving forward, continuing to take steps. And I think that's so important for folks in leadership roles at all levels, right? In life, in organizations and communities, is to say, take steps, keep moving forward, right? And you look up and the 26.2 is behind you, right? And so that idea of resilience, what do you think many leaders miss or get wrong?
I think they're afraid to fail.
Okay.
So my biggest thing is I'm going to fail forward.
Got it.
So I'm not afraid of failure, right? And so I don't hesitate, right? And I'd love to call something a pilot.
Yeah.
Oh, I love to call something a pilot. Because as soon as you call it a pilot, it takes away like the long-term commitment.
That's
takes
right.
along, it's less of a commitment.
Yes.
It's pilots and not taking that step. I particularly, I mentor quite a few folks. And it's always very interesting to me that most folk count themselves out before they even take the swing. And so what I say is take the swing and okay, so you miss, right? You strike out. You learn something in that process.
That's right.
Right. And so if it's a job, if it's you want to apply for a job or you want to do something. And for me, I use fear as an indicator that I'm moving in the right direction.
Nice.
Right now, I'm not talking about like running in the middle of the street, right? Not that type of fear. Not like don't jump in front of a lion, right? Not that type of fear. But usually, when I'm fearful of something, or I'm unsure or insecure about something, I will what's called lean into my discomfort.
There it is.
I will push forward. I learned that in graduate school, and the best thing I could have learned: lean into my discomfort. Because usually in that discomfort is where, the growth is happening.
That's right.
So going back to the running thing, in my case, like jogging, waggling, it's that same thing. Lean into the discomfort, not enough to where it's going to break you.
Yes.
But we always can probably do a little bit more than we think.
That's good.
Yeah. But fear is, that's something I redefined what fear was for me.
Awesome. That is awesome. It just reminds me of I was finishing a marathon at 5 hours, and I was coming around the corner to head towards the finish line, and I heard the announcer say, "Now these are people who could have quit."
Okay, I gotta take that with me. Oh, I love that.
But it's this idea, to your point, around like lean in, don't quit, keep moving forward, right?
Yeah.
And use that fear as data.
Yes.
Right? Use that fear as things you might want to double check. But I think there's a myth. Tell me what you think about this. I think there's a myth that once you hit a certain level of leadership success or whatever it is, that fear will go away.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, you are absolutely spot on when it comes to that. It's interesting. Even you were doing my introduction, right? Sometimes it's almost like I'm listening to, like, it's not about me.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
I still have a hard time
Yeah.
taking compliments,
Yes.
right? There's some cultural stuff there,
Mhm.
right? Being Latina, right?
Yes.
You never put the spotlight on you,
Yeah.
right? No seas presumida, meaning like don't be stuck up, don't be,
Yes.
who does she think she
Absolutely.
is,
Yes.
So I got to combat some of that stuff. So there's that
Mhm.
cultural thing that,
Hey, it's
and
real.
then there's the gender thing too, right? So
Yes.
there's all these different aspects, and when it comes to that. But I think you're right. I think we have to be in a space with it, just again, is that growth mindset. There is no such thing as arriving,
That's right.
right? Okay, you've arrived to that station, right?
Mhm.
What's the next station?
That's right.
And there's always something to learn, which is the
Mhm.
beauty of it, right? There's the beauty of it, and even going back to what you were talking about, cultivating, right? So, I already have my next 3 professional development,
Yes.
institutes that I want to do.
Very good.
Right. I got my goals of where I'm trying to get to. And I have kind of a marker of where I want to get to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's never a complacency
Yeah.
of where you're at. So yeah, I agree with
Yeah.
you.
Talk a little bit about how the martial arts because to achieve a second degree black
Mhm.
belt as a Latina woman,
hmm
right, is a commitment that not that this was your goal, but puts you in a place and in a space where you don't see a whole lot of reflections of you, I would imagine.
Yeah. And actually, I want to add another
Please.
dimension to that too. A large
Okay.
woman,
Okay.
because, so let me go back to go forward.
Yes.
So when I was little,
Uh-huh.
right, lucha libre was a big thing. So I'm the
Yes,
youngest of
yes.
5. So my brothers would, with the
Yes, the
máscaras, the
mask
mask
and
and everything,
yes.
right? So like before WWF,
Yes.
right? Lucha libre was a big thing. And Bruce Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce Lee in my household was like a thing. I had brothers jumping off couches, and then
Yes.
I was little and I wanted to jump off couches too. And I always wanted to do martial arts. It was something that I had a love for, but I wouldn't do it because I was heavyset. And when I'd go into a karate studio, because I'd have enough, guts to go into a karate studio, and I'd walk in, nobody looked like me, right? It was very much male dominated. It was, it was a bunch of other things. Not until I leaned into my discomfort.
Yes.
Not until, here's the other part of it too, though. I had to find a sensei that saw the value in me. Because I think that's another piece of it too, right? If you're in a space where you are not valued,
Yes.
go find somewhere that values you.
Say that again.
Because you can spend so much time in trying to convince them and change their mind that you're missing your windows of opportunity. So I found the right sensei who believed in me and didn't tell me, lose all this weight and then come back. He took me where I was at that moment in time, and we just started.
There it is.
Right? And I think when I first started, I think they didn't even have a karate uniform that fit me because they weren't used to,
Yes.
But we figured it out,
Yes.
right? And so I for me, that has been a piece, even to this day. When you see me in the karate studio, there's not a lot of people that, look like me.
On.
But just like leadership, do you.
Yes.
Right? If folks want different results, well, then they're going to need to have folks that look different in these leadership positions.
That's right.
So here I am, look different, right? But I bring a uniqueness, right? My little unicorn self, right? I bring a uniqueness, and so I'm getting different results, right? But I think the most important piece in that, again, is in that leadership thing is just show up.
That's right.
I had a trainer, that was his biggest thing, just show up. And I tell you, I've never gone to a karate class where I regretted going to the class, right? And to this day, I have my, some private lessons at 6:00 in the morning, right? I invest in myself because I think that's the other part. Invest in yourself and what it is that you want to do. But everything with my martial arts and my second degree has been, folks didn't look like me. I still pushed, right? I wasn't even sure I was going to be good at it. And I'm not good at it. But guess what? I still pushed. I kept showing up in all of those, things. And I think that's kind of a metaphor for some of this other leadership stuff. But here's the thing, right? I'm still working at it.
Go.
And I'm going to keep working at it even, to who knows how old, 103, one of my head senseis, Hanshi Tadashi Yamashita, I believe he's 83, and he moves like he's 40.
There it is.
Amazing.
There it is. That's awesome. And so if others don't see me, find someone who will.
Absolutely.
And make sure that I'm working to see myself.
Absolutely.
And be the leader that sees people.
Yes.
For who they are and where they are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's powerful.
Because I the other part of it too is my community of origin, right? It is interesting because as you get certain success metrics, right? It's interesting how your origin of community also can change and so forth. And one of the things that I have found is that, not everybody has a front row seat in my life, right? Those people who have a front row seat in my life truly, truly believe in me, right? And in my success, and because they believe in their success and where they're at, right? You know what they say, water seeks its own level.
That's right.
So I'm constantly trying to raise my water level by hanging out with folks, that are just doing amazing things, right? And for me, in the auditorium of my life, some people may be in the balconies, right? I still love them where they're at, but it's probably not the best thing in the direction that I'm wanting to go. So I think that's really important, to surround yourself with folks that are truly invested and love you and believe in you. And here's another thing I'm going to tell you about the whole leadership thing, and these roles and positions. Have a life outside of your work. Because if you don't cultivate that life outside of your work, and all you do is work, because some of the old leadership models, that's what they tell us. That's right. That is work and life are the same thing.
That's right.
And it may have worked for folks at one point in time. But what I find is that if I don't have a full life outside of my job, I will start to play out my issues of power and control within my role as the CEO. And that's not fair.
That's right.
It's not fair to the people who are around me. That's not fair to the mission, the purpose. So I'm a very, very big believer in, investing in something outside of your job.
Yeah, that's so powerful, right? To hold that balance, because if you as a person are out of balance, then you as the person in the leadership role gets out of balance. That impacts the balance of the team, the community, the organization, the campus.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but again, it goes back to your point, that cultivation, right? It goes back to me even being aware that I'm out of balance.
Yep.
Right. Talk a little bit about the shift in how you see your leadership have changed or adjusted pre-COVID versus post-COVID, pre the murder of George Floyd versus post the murder of George Floyd, pre the quiet quitting versus post, right? Pre the generational differences that we all live. How have you seen, what adjustments have you made in your own leadership? One question. Two, what adjustments do you think leaders need to think about in the pre versus post, in that shift?
Well, it's interesting because I would say that my purpose, which drives the leadership, hasn't changed.
Nice.
Right? So that piece hasn't changed, but how it manifests itself has changed. And part of it has to be the idea of being adaptable, right? That's the one thing that the pandemic, right? Things that we said, oh my goodness, there's no way that we could ever do that, right? All of a sudden, with that forced change, right? We we adapted. So what I learned quickly is what I thought was something static, always requires refinement and change. Right. So yes, the pandemic may have shown the rest of us, right? Like all of us how to okay, well, no, change is possible. So it's evidence that change is possible. But I think if we still maintain that mindset in what it is that we're doing now, right? So before, if somebody would say something to me, my first answer was like, no, we can't do that,
Yes.
right? That's not it anymore, because I just go back to the pandemic
That's
and I'm
right.
like, well, we thought we couldn't do that either,
That's
and we
right.
did. And the beauty of that is that you're not working with yes, no's anymore. You're working with possibilities. And that's the piece. And that's the whole piloting, and that's the whole failing forward.
Yes.
Let's see how we do this. We don't have to make a
Yes.
long-term commitment, but let's try different ways of being and challenging some of those ideas that what we thought, was leadership.
Yes.
So
Very good.
yeah.
Very good. I always think about regarding innovation, right? How do we innovate?
Yes.
Somebody told me, they said, if you think you know the outcome when you start innovating, you're not innovating.
Right.
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 That we have to stay open to the possibilities and open to the limitations we have within our mindset. What's a closing message that you have for leaders listening to this podcast? What is one key takeaway that you would like for them to hold on to from tuning in?
For me, the work that I do really is to use education as a vehicle to uplift and to change and to give people opportunities that they were not born into, right? As such, I do some work with formerly incarcerated students who have made mistakes in their lives, who have paid their debt to society, and now are trying to find education as a way to move forward. And the one thing that we always have a conversation about is that one chapter does not define your life book. And at any moment in time, you get to decide what the next chapter looks like, and you get to decide how that story ends. I really believe it's the same with leadership. It's that take what you have learned, good, bad, ugly, and different, and constantly invest in yourself, reinvent yourself, use fear as something that might motivate you, believe in yourself, surround yourself with people who are going to believe in you, because the sun is going to rise tomorrow.
Come on.
And what you decide to do with your life, it's never, ever too late. And I think it's the same with leadership. And again, formalized and informalized leadership. If we all did our part to make the world a better place, and we all added our little drop to that, we'd have an ocean of change where the future could look even brighter than it does today.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard this from Oceanside to Oceans of Change. Okay, just saying. The wealth of, I just lost it, y'all. I hate it when that happens. But the idea of really, the wealth of dreams, that's what it was, right? Remembering that wealth of dreams becomes just so powerful. And you heard it first. Superintendent President Dr. Star Rivera-Lacey. Thank you so much for being on the Leadership Secret.
Thank you for having me.
This
Thank you
is
for having me.
just a pleasure. And let me just say a shout out to the Community-Based Block Program, CBB, at San Diego State, because I know that was a big part of the core development of who you are today. So shout out to the program. It's at San Diego State University. This is a shameless plug. It was not asked. I was motivated, let me just say. But thank you all for tuning in to the Leadership Secret podcast. I'm going to ask you to click on the link below and like and subscribe the podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are really, really excited to continue to bring you top leaders who are unpacking and uncovering those secrets to effective leadership. Thanks for being with us.